They beat me to my podcast name. What now? I get this call more often than you would think. They say, Gordon, I just found out that someone else filed a trademark application for my podcast name, and now we're dealing with trouble. Well, the next question always comes really fast. They can't do that, right? I've been using it for years, right? Here's the truth. In the US, trademark rights usually come from first use in commerce, not from who files first. So no, filing first doesn't automatically mean that they own your name. But, and this is the part that surprises a lot of folks, filing first could still put you in a very, very real and very annoying fight. So in this episode, I'm going to explain what that initial early filing really means, how priority of registration actually works, what options you may still have, and the exact reason why creators end up forced into rebrands even when they were there first. Hello and welcome to Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark with an important heads up for content creators. Now, most content creators don't delay trademark registration because they're careless. No, they delay because they're focused on making the show better, building the audience, proving the concept, getting consistent, or maybe just saving money. And all of that makes sense. The problem is trademark trouble doesn't usually appear right from the start. No, it shows up when things start working and finding their groove. Right when you're getting traction, people are searching your name, you're booking bigger guests, sponsors start asking about who owns the brand. And here's the key. The moment your show becomes more visible, other people could start using the same or similar name, sometimes innocently, sometimes not. And suddenly everything starts to go off the rails. So stick around because in a minute I'm going to explain why this becomes a leverage problem even when you have priority. So here's the big misunderstanding. They filed first, so I'm toast. Well, let's clean up this myth right away. Here in the US, we are generally a first use based system. So the real question usually is who used this name first in interstate commerce for these kinds of services in a way that creates trademark rights. That's the real question that determines priority. But here's where creators end up getting blindsided. Even if you use the name first, you may still have to prove it, document it, define the scope of what you've used it for, and so on. And sometimes you have to fight over it. And all of that can be very expensive, very time-consuming, very distracting. Now, the opposite mistake also happens, where some creators assume, I used it first, so I don't need to register. But that is also risky because common law rights can be geographic and very limited in scope. They can be harder to enforce, harder to explain to platforms and partners and sponsors, and easier for other people to challenge. So yes, priority often comes from use, but registration really can change your life in a good way if you do it at the right time, early, and correctly. So that leads us to our next point. What filing and registration do and what they change even in a first use system. Because when someone files before you, it can still shift the practical situation. Not because they're magically becoming the owner, but because a federal application or registration could give them tools and advantages like a public record that looks official to outsiders, a basis to pressure platforms or partners, a stronger posture in negotiations, and if they ultimately secure registration, certain legal presumptions and nationwide benefits, depending on all the circumstances. And here's the big practical reality. Most creators aren't in this for a fight. They don't want that legal fight. They want to make content. So if someone else is waving around a filing or a registration, even that creator who has the priority of use could feel pressured to either spend the time and energy and money to prove use, hiring counsel, responding to the threats, or they may make a business decision that they hate, like changing names, the dreaded rebrand. Now, coming up, I will give you the moment when creators usually realize there's no longer a small branding issue. But let's talk about what first use really means. No law school lecture here. When we say first use in commerce, what we're talking about is real world use that identifies your show or your channel as the source. It's public facing, It's connected to the services that you're offering, like entertainment content, podcast episodes, or production or something like that. It's not just a private idea or a draft logo or a domain name registration or a social handle that you've barely used or a project file on your laptop. No, priority usually comes from outward-facing use that the public encounters, or at least could encounter. So if you've been publishing under a channel name or a show title for a while, you probably have priority. But if you've been planning a name for years and haven't actually done anything with it, well, that's a different story. That's why documentation and proof matters. So what can you do if someone else files first? Well, if you discover someone else filed an application for your name, there are a few high-level paths without getting lost in the weeds. First off, figure out whether you do indeed have priority based on your actual use. Find out whether there's a real likelihood of confusion. That's an evaluation you may want to talk to a lawyer about. Decide whether to oppose or negotiate or coexist. Usually in the trademark application process, there is a window of time, a 30-day window after it's been approved, but before it's been registered, where the mark is published for opposition. And so it's a good time to raise your alarm and make your claims there to oppose the registration, because once it goes through, it's a lot harder to get it canceled after the fact. But in some cases, you may decide that a strategic rebrand is more cost effective than a prolonged fight later on. So here's the critical piece. The longer you wait after you discover that issue, that there's someone else out there using the name, the fewer good options that you will tend to have. Not because the law switches sides, but because that delay could increase confusion in the marketplace, could increase the other party's entrenchment with the name. It could increase the cost and complexity of untangling things because now you're suing to cancel rather than filing an opposition to the registration. Lots of things there. So the real cost of waiting. This is what I see again and again. The creator's ready to monetize, the sponsor asks for basic due diligence, or a partner wants to sign some kind of a deal, or a platform opportunity comes up, and suddenly they're asking the question, do you actually own this brand that you're building on? Well, that's when the filing issue stops being academic. Even if you have first use priority, you could still lose time, money, and momentum proving it, especially if you never filed a registration and didn't get this kind of thing cleaned up early. So let's just put this all in some perspective. This isn't about paranoia. It's not about leverage. It is sort of about leverage, excuse me. What it is something that you want to grow. If you're building something that you want to grow and protect and monetize, trademark strategy is part of the business, not an afterthought. And if you're worried that someone could beat you to your podcast or channel name, or you've discovered that they already filed, well, the smart next step is a conversation with someone like me. Now, every situation is different, so it really pays to know exactly where you stand, and the only way to do that is to consult with an expert, someone who does this stuff for a living. So if you want to talk with me and talk through your specific facts and options, I invite you to schedule a trademark strategy call by visiting gpf.link/tmcall. That's my first, middle, and last initial, GPF, Gordon P. Firemark, gpf.link/tmcall, trademark call. And what we'll do is we'll look at what your priority situation actually is. We'll look at what the other party's filing really means in this particular situation, and what the cleanest, most cost-effective path forward is going to look like for you. No pressure, just clarity. Now, over the next few weeks, we're going to be digging into some other trademark problems that creators run into, things like audience confusion and forced rebranding, so you can protect your momentum rather than digging your way out of a bad position. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you again really, really soon. But in the meantime, keep on creating, get out there, do great work, and I'll see you again soon.